Welcome back to the Chi Podcast. Today I'm joined with Tracie Connor, who is a practitioner of nutrition, and we have an engaging conversation around all things health. If you want to jump right to the start of the podcast, that's at about 9 minutes. Otherwise, here are some interesting pre-podcast discussions. Yeah, so I've been running at quite high momentum for a while, and
yeah, right.
You know, when you're trying to create something in business, you go from a state of being into doing. Mm-hmm. And if you get too caught up in doing, you get high momentum, nervous system activation, and you really need to have enough being in your week where you can kind of have that balance of sympathetic, parasympathetic activation.
Correct.
So I've been trying to honor that. The tricky thing is when you're trying to build a business up to that kind of critical threshold, it requires so much focus and doing. That's a tricky one to balance.
It is. And so what are some of your techniques to try and balance? Do you have some?
Meditation is a really good one, but the problem is when you need it the most, you feel like doing it the least.
Correct.
So I do have an ice bath once a week that's kind of scheduled into my routine.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That's a really good reset. And each week that it comes around, I'm like, oh, so don't feel like doing it. But it definitely anchors in a practice that really does help reset a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And do you stay in for long? Like, are you a pro?
Well, I do about 3 to 4 minutes, and it's usually around 2 to 5 degrees that we've been having it at.
That's really good. I've only tried it once, or maybe twice actually, but yeah, that's really good. That's very, very nice.
With the consistency, you can build up to that. I think, you know, the first time I did it, I definitely didn't stay in very long, maybe 30 seconds.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I don't even know if I got past my knees. I went in and, you know, it was one of those things going, okay, I'll just do this. But then the second time was actually only recently when my friends have bought a mobile sauna and ice bath scenario in a business, and they invited me along. It was lovely. And of course, then I had peer pressure. It was like, get in, Tracie, get in, and we're going to film it and we're going to use it for advertising. And, you know, like I had to kind of be in the moment to just go, I'm doing it for my friends. I'm doing it for my friends. And I think I might have stayed in for 30 seconds or a minute or something. And it was freezing and it was raining too. And we were outdoors. So it made it even colder. Yeah. So it was very intense.
Did you use your breathing while you were in there? And you felt yourself break through to that kind of, your breathing slowed from like hyperventilation to a really controlled, slow, rhythmic breathing?
Yes, and that was guided. So I think I didn't even focus on my breathing. I was focusing on climbing up on the barrel and, you know, doing all the motions just to go, okay, I need to get in here and it's going to freeze, and how do I prepare myself for that? And then once I'm in, I think it was very obvious to the host that I was kind of, you know, not maybe
resisting
I was fine,
to a degree.
But, you know. Yeah, exactly. And so she's like, just breathe. And when I did, it was so much easier to be in there. But then I could start to feel the discomfort as well, the freezing, the literally freezing. So, yeah.
There's a few layers to it. Definitely getting in is half the battle, because it's something that you really don't want to do. And so even breaking through that and committing to it is an achievement in itself, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's like really anything, isn't it? Because a lot of what is maybe looks like discomfort for us can actually be very beneficial. And it's about that whole, I'm going to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes we build up the discomfort to be greater than it actually is too.
That's right. That's where that acronym of FEAR, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but FEAR is false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just fear. I mean, it's not even real. I mean, there are some things that would be. Let's not get overboard here, because I guess if we're standing on the edge of a building, you know, there's actual factual evidence that this is real, and it could be very damaging. But most often our fears aren't, definitely.
Yeah, certainly out of those sort of things where it's psycho-emotional, or going to the gym, ice bath, doing anything like that.
The basics,
challenging
right?
oneself.
Yes, absolutely. And then meditation, getting back to what you're saying, it's often when we need it the most that we just go, we don't have time. I can't do this. I can't stop and focus on this when it's so unproductive, and that's the sort of thing. Yeah.
And that's something I'm really passionate about, is creating sustainable momentum and productivity. So in addition, the things I was mentioning to you are kind of a little bit more macro mechanisms to maintain balance. But even throughout the day, that's where it's also essential to find a level of productivity, build up to peak momentum, but then also come back to a bit of stillness and not just try and run at 100% the whole day. Try and find ways to, I've got a pool table outside the office. So that's actually a great way just to get out of the mind and focus on something else. A little bit of connection with others, maybe go for a walk. Little things that are peppered throughout the day that can create awareness to go back to the body and relieving a little bit of the stress that comes with that, but also bringing momentum down from like red line back to a neutral level.
Yeah, that's a great way of illustrating it. Yeah, I love it. And even you mentioning the pool table there, what a great activity it is. I grew up with a pool table, and whenever I see one, I play. It's great, isn't it? It really, you're in the present, you're in the now, and you're focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an achiever and you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's a good way to get into a little bit of a flow state as well.
Yes.
Because you can.
Absolutely.
I'm reading the book Ikigai at the moment. If you've read that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. A while ago now, but I know the theme of it. Yep.
I think
so good.
One of the things that has stood out to me of many, the process of creating a ritual and then being able to enter like a state of flow. For example, the example of the person who is the elevator attendant, which they've done for 20 years and could be, quite a mundane job that would bore most of us, but they've created a sense of pageantry, of flow, of really taking care in the process. And I felt that was really profound, that let's say our morning ritual, like having a coffee and, you pour it and then you sit there and you really enjoy it, or whatever it may be. But when you create like a ritual or a process that creates flow, I think that's where we get a lot of well-being from.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that state of flow that I think majority of us are trying to achieve a majority of the time. Yes. Because it's where the magic happens, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, from that state, I think a lot of quality can flow through us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny, even just, I know I'm probably veering on tangents here, but even just, a good old going for a walk, and I'll quickly tap on YouTube and maybe watch some videos that I've saved or look at some shorts. And a lot of what I've been, receiving, maybe it's the algorithm, maybe it's just what I need to see, but it's always about our vibrational state. So, and very much in that flow and about achieving that and ways to achieve it. But it's, I think once you do it, it's like anything. It's like getting into a habit of anything. Once you consciously are doing it, it's easier to get back into that state. I think it's just the initial, whether you forget and then you get reminded, or whether people haven't really done it much before, but it's a practice.
Yeah, 100%. I think having the anchoring in and understanding what it feels like, so you know what you're striving towards, but then also realizing what are the processes or the methods to achieve that state as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that term, anchoring, too. I have a friend of mine that conducts meditation courses, and he talks about when he gets meditating, he anchors. Yes. He uses those words. Anyway,
let's.
You definitely have to drive this bus, because I go on tangents.
Well, no, that's fine. I like to have a little bit of a warm up conversation where we can get things flowing. Now I can introduce the start of the podcast. I'd like to welcome to the Chi podcast, Tracie Connor. Tracie is an accredited nutritionist who provides personal and corporate health services. She's also an experienced public speaker, health programs manager, and media spokesperson. She's featured on such programs as news.com.au, Women's Health and Fitness magazine, Sydney Morning Herald, and many more. So welcome to the Chi podcast, Tracie Connor.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. Thank you.
You're very welcome. and it was cool. I put a bit of a broadcast out on social media, and you were one of a few who responded to me. And it's really cool when you kind of put that message out and the right people connect with you. And I really feeling that's happening.
Oh, that's so good to hear. And I agree. And I think really the serendipity of it too is that I'm not on social media all the time. And I saw your post and it was just the right timing as well. And then it came to fruition. So I often, I love that sort of serendipity of it too.
Absolutely.
It's not like I have a team of people that are scouring for, podcast opportunities or anything like that. It was literally just, oh, here I am. There you are. Perfect. And then you reached out. I said, great.
Yeah. Like we were talking before the podcast, when it flows.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we had some topics around holistic health today, stress management, women's health, gut-brain connection, genetic data reading for tailored health services, like diet, exercise, disease prevention. So there's some cool things to dive into today. And I'm happy to jump off on any that you feel passionate about there that are at the forefront of your focus at the moment.
Do you know what? I'd rather even, I know that you're really interested in the genetic testing part because I know you said that to me earlier too, like, oh, that's really interesting. So whether you want to start there or whether you want to lead up to it, I'm going to let you drive it. So I'm happy to talk about anything.
So
jump in. Okay. Yep.
What is genetic data reading for tailored health services?
Okay. So I guess in another sense, it's genetic testing, but it's not an invasive test, and it's not. It sounds very technical. It is very technical at the end of the day, but the general public that get the testing done, it's not technical for them. So genetic testing is looking at our genes to understand the blueprint of our health. So, the irony is when a child is born in the parent world, it's like, well, they don't come with manuals. And for most of parenting, that's actually very, very true. But when it comes to perhaps what's best for them in their dietary and health lifestyle practices, you can actually get a genetic test done to look at what the strengths and the weaknesses are, usually derived from mum and dad, that will help them to thrive, or potentially, I don't want to say the claim of create disease, but I think, has the potential to do that.
Have the predisposition for it.
Absolutely. So we all come with strengths and weaknesses in our genetics, in part of our DNA, and to be able to actually get the data on that is profound. And I started offering that. I think it was, I studied it. It's called nutrigenomics. The science of it is called nutrigenomics. So it's not disease prediction. It's purely looking at someone's nutrition and lifestyle and exercise profile. But as we mentioned, if you start working with your genes, you're going to thrive. When you start working against them, that's when problems arise. So, that's kind of the overview. But ask me questions.
Sure. So that's epigenetics, isn't it? The expression of genes based on, or is it a little bit different?
It is that. That's the technical side of it. So basically that I know that in the labs, and I work with a company that the labs are in Canada. And they have head office in Sydney in Australia. And then I've been offering it, as I mentioned, now it's coming up to 8 years that I've been offering these tests. And every year there's more to the tests and more juicy data that's derived from them. But I believe that the actual lab and scientists get a SNP, an SNP from the DNA strands, and the DNA, which is buccal cells, which is almost like the saliva in the mouth is where they collect the DNA. Yep. And they get a SNP from that, and they test different genes and different compounds with the SNP to then work out whether someone has a weakness or a strength to that.
And that's what I was going to ask.
In layman terms.
If this was SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, I think is right off the top of my head.
Perfect. And look, I'm telling it very layman's term too. I'm sure the company I work with, Nutrigenomics, would love me to be able to elaborate just that much more. But I think it's important for people just to know it's not. That's what I was saying. It's not invasive. It's very much easy tech. They've been doing this for a long, long time. Well before the 8 years that I joined, they've been looking at DNA in relation to how people are functioning and why two people on the same diet and lifestyle regime are coming out with two different results. And that could be easy. It could be easy for us to just think, well, that's, of course, the genetics. But wouldn't it be fantastic to know what those genes are? And instead of, it just takes the trial and error out of life.
Exactly.
That's what I like about it. Yeah.
That's the challenge, isn't it? That, say in Australia, we've got national health recommendations. And the thing is, like you just said, health is so individual due to genetics that for one person, low carb might be better, for another person,
correct,
high carb, etc. And then you have people that have one type of diet that works great for them, and then they become advocates of it, and they're like, this is the way. And then someone else on the opposing, keto, carnivore, etc. And then
welcome to our industry.
yeah
It's flooded. I entered the nutrition and natural health industry, I think I graduated, it's coming up to 16 17 years ago, and it was a completely different arena back then. It still had its messiness, but it was not as confusing, I think, for people as it is now. And look, some of the information that is shared there is actually really legitimate, but there's a lot of confusing messages, and that's 99%. I was going to say 90, but 99% of the people that I see, at some point in my conversation with them, it will be very much like, I'm just confused. I don't know what to do. This worked for that person. I'm being told this. That sounded good. It sounded right. They were very convincing. Look how well it's worked for them. And it's another thing. It's not just our genetics too. That's definitely the baseline for our health, and our outcomes is working with our genes. But sometimes by the time people have seen me, it's also a really heavy factor on how they've been living for so long against their genetics that it's almost, you have to start there to relieve those symptoms before you can even get to the baseline. Let's do this as a genetic thing. So a lot of people, do you know what I mean? There's layers there, because our bodies are really sophisticated. Our bodies are continuously trying to protect us and help us to survive. That's all they want. So if your body isn't working with you, it's a big scream out that there's something wrong, or there's something not right.
Let's say someone's genetics indicate that they should be eating a diet that's, like fermented food and like et cetera and X, Y, Z. But the way they've been living has caused their body suffering, and they've now got histamine intolerance. And then a fermented food would be triggering that. So although their genetics say they should be eating that, they have to resolve the current symptoms to then be able to work back to that.
Correct. That's right. There's different layers to health. Yeah. And look, and a nice little catchphrase for genetics that I've been sharing since I've started offering it is just to remember that genetics, here I am on the moment forgetting it, but it's the genetics holds the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
And it's, we're all born with these strengths and weaknesses, but it's what sets them off and what makes people achieve so well and so easily, and then what makes people suffer so much.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's lifestyle as well. So there's a lot of education involved. It's not just about getting a test done and going, right, I need to do this, but it's also very profound. And if I had any guests, any of my DNA patients that have taken the test, they would actually speak for me. In fact, I've got a Google page, and that most people that have done the DNA test actually do the review because it's so astounding for them. They almost needed a source of truth. And while they want to trust me as their source of truth, which they can, I also rely on the data that comes from their body to tell me what that source of truth is. And so then when I relay it to them with these genetic tests, it's clear for them. They start following it. And it's even if it doesn't solve all of their problems straight up because they need to adjust lifestyle as well, it's profound what it does, even in a short term, Jeremy, like what it does help them with and achieve.
Yeah,
and so that they're almost then the poster children for it. And then they start going, this is, I think at the end of the day, why I got involved in it too, is because I see it as the way of the future. I think how can you measure something if you don't have the data? How can you move on it? How can you work with something if you don't know what you're really working with? Because yes, there's plenty of people out there, plenty of health practitioners and everyone selling cookie cutter plans and going, this is the way, yep, just, move this. Everyone can just do low fat or low carb or whatever else and move on. But it's never sustainable, and it's not the answer, basically.
No. And what I was going to say about that too, how confusing it is in this day and age. There's so many people now that aren't in a regulated space that can really be strong advocates of a particular way that maybe worked for them, but it lacks the nuance. And I think the problem is a non-nuanced approach is the most marketable. If I'm like, no, you need to cut out sugar, and sugar's been the problem. It raises insulin and then drops and raises cortisol, causes inflammation. You're like, well, that makes sense. And it's grounded in truth, but it's not applying there's times and people where not sugar per se, but high carb or whatever may be beneficial, or maybe just not low carb would be detrimental. And
Absolutely.
while it's creating a profit, you're always going to end up with people that are kind of taking that hard approach.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, most of my peers and colleagues are very true to their passion and their willingness to want to help people. And for that being then maybe not rolling in the millions, it's an industry that's, we do it for heart. I'm very fortunate with what I have, but it's, we do it with we're led by our heart. I think you need to, in our practice, look at making the money by doing other things. Do you know what I mean? That could perhaps, and again, I have a lot of colleagues that have created products, for instance, or they've done something else that might be more substantial, but there are a lot of people flooding our social media platforms and everything else that just, unfortunately they're business people.
Yeah. And, it would be a problem if someone's like, carnivore's the way for these people, because that could be true. But if you're trying to say it's true for everyone, then it's not going to be completely ethical. Yeah, exactly.
That's cookie cutter. And you know what? There are plenty of people out there, plenty of consumers out there that are happy with cookie cutter plans and they just want something, and but it's about then finding the people that don't. And it's just like how we found each other on social media. It was the right timing, get in the flow, all that sort of stuff. We could go on different levels here, but I think that it's why practices, such as even my practice or my colleagues, is that it still works, because there's still plenty of people out there that want the truth and they want the tailored plans. They want to know that what they're getting is not just something that someone else got as well.
Yeah, I'm very much of that persuasion that, I could go type on ChatGPT, give me a plan, and I could get that same program. So I want someone that's got expertise, that's seen other people's experience and can give me a really individual tailored plan that's like, hey, I've thought about it. I've looked at DNA testing. This is what I've seen work for people in your case, or based on my experience, this is the best pathway for you. And that's the kind of expertise I'm going to pay for.
Well, that's right. And you know what? I love the analogy too, that we could jump on Chatty now, if you don't know, Chatty's anyway, and type, what is the best path to take when I'm climbing Everest? But wouldn't you prefer a Sherpa? Wouldn't you prefer someone that's walked it and halfway through the path, instead of jumping on Chatty while you're halfway up there, them saying, I can tell the wind is blowing this way and the sun is facing this way, and whatever other magic they're doing to say, no, we need to take this path, and all that sort of stuff. It's guided, it's well trekked, it's well documented. That's where the expertise come in. You do get people that don't see it like that, but then of course you get your smarts that do, and they go, we need legitimate. Like, we can use Chatty for some other things. Chatty writes great bedtime stories for my kids and stuff, and I can ask it general questions. But I think to get that, if you're serious about something, it's really important to get a guide, because I think it's not about just the path, is it? It's the hurdles that you face on the path and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, and when like you said,
problem,
the path presents a challenge and you have to correct course. Often if you're doing that on your own, the uncertainty can really halt, and you may make a incorrect decision or a suboptimal decision that makes the path even harder. But perhaps ChatGPT would be beneficial for someone that's like super early on their health journey and like is just trying to do general things, which they could find that information on the internet anywhere. But when it gets to a more nuanced approach with a complex set of conditions, that's where you'd really want to have a practitioner that you work with that can guide you.
Yes. Well, I think so too. And I think you're right. If someone's just starting out on their journey, it could be as basic as just having more water, drinking more water, moving more during the day, and those basic fundamental, what we need, what we were made to do as a human. As humans, this is what we need: water. There's so many different foods and that sort of things. But then people go, well, should I be walking or should I be doing push-ups?
Yeah.
And then it's going, well, that's where you need the tailored advice. And we'll look at different factors. Yeah.
So you're right. Even on the early health journey, hearing something from a person as well, like we said before, tends to anchor in. It resonates. And, you can look at so much text on the internet and get clues. And maybe a small amount of people can actually execute on that. But I think when you've paid for something, you've therefore valued it, you've created a container where you're receptive, and then you actually are like, okay, now I've kind of committed to it. Yeah.
Correct. 100%. And I think I think if people are really honest with themselves, that's actually going to move the needle, as opposed to just dipping their toe in and saying, oh, I'll give it a try. Because most of the time when people do hit a hurdle in their learning journey, if it's not prepared properly and they're not invested, they will just give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that simple.
Until the pain increases enough that the symptoms or whatever it is.
And that's true, right? So it often, for people to make a move with anything in life, it often takes both a really equal amount of push and pull. So is the pain greater than the
resistance
comfort?
To change.
Yeah, that's right. So you'd often need that going, I really do want to get healthier. I really do want to be able to run around and wake up and still bounce out of bed and feel good about myself, as opposed to just going through the motions and going, oh, whatever. I've still got a job and I can, have friends and, and sort of getting along. It really takes a bit of push and pull. There usually has to be a really big why. It's one of the big things I ask people when they work with me, because then I use that why as an anchor to keep bringing it back to go, remember this, remember. And sometimes some people for different circumstances, that why, after a certain amount of time, or they just, something happens, that hurdle is too big for them to overcome. It won't be. We need to find another level to it, because humans are complex, and that's fine too. And you work with that, but it often takes, it's a bit of psychology behind this work as well, to work with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's the thing. You can know what to do, but that doesn't mean that you're going to do it.
Correct. Yeah. And I think as well, a lot of people, when they see me, not everyone jumps in to get the functional testing. I really highly recommend it, because it does save them a lot of time. There's a lot of answers up front, but a lot of people choose not to, and I don't force anyone into anything. And a lot of people are a bit ashamed of their lifestyle. And when I ask them, this is after getting to know them, and perhaps that they'll share their lifestyle and their diet with me, it's always a little bit better than what it really is. It's almost like they don't want to disappoint. And so it's a very psychological thing there too. And I understand that. I understand it. So it's almost a case of really breaking down that barrier. And no matter how well I build rapport with people, no matter how safe they feel with me, it's the shame within themselves. A lot of people, to be honest with you as well, don't like to admit that they're seeing a nutritionist. That's something they want to keep out of wraps. They would rather just get fit and healthy and lose weight and feel great and sleep better and everything. And if people say, how did that happen? Most of the time they'll recommend, or that they'll mention it, but other times they want to just think that it's a birthright. So they should have just done it. People should just know it as well. And I see that a lot in practice as well. And I have to reassure people that often it is a birthright, but we aren't taught a lot of this. And now that there's so much information out there, it just becomes even more confusing. So to not be hard on themselves.
Totally. And there's so many variables stacked against us collectively that would go against our optimal way of living. It's pretty understandable how many of us get caught in that.
Oh gosh, absolutely, absolutely. That's why even one of the things that you and I spoke about in the background there too were some of the things that I'm seeing really present in clinic and working with people. Even not only in clinic, I do when I'm working with workplaces and corporates. It's usually the questions that we'll be asking or the topics that they'll want me to talk about, and a lot of it's stress management. Now, when people see me, Jeremy, they don't knock on my door and say, I need stress management help, I'm going to see you as a nutritionist. It's usually that their body is producing that many unwanted symptoms of, unwanted weight that they can't shift and really bad sleep that's just causing a domino of negativity through their day and irritability and moods and everything else, that they come to see me and say, I need to work this out. But in the background, as a practitioner, we classify it as different things. And that could be stress management techniques. That could be gut health, brain, mental health, gut health, hormone health, you name it. So,
yeah. I really think stress management is such a key thing going forward because technology use, an ever intense society with so many things that are taking our focus and so much need to be busy and doing.
Yeah. I agree. And there's so many, I think there's, where do I start here? I think there's so many ways to approach stress management as well. Honestly, I could list them all. I won't even bother. But if you want some examples, let me know. But when it comes to people, just to remind them as well that they are in the driver's seat with it. It's really it's a choice. What I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Let me know. I
was going to say I came up with something because I've created this course recently, which is around holistic health.
Yes,
and
great.
Going from awareness, physical vitality, mental clarity, and spiritual alignment.
Beautiful.
And in the physical vitality section, I have a bit on stress management.
Yes.
And I identified, after thinking about it, 4 types of stress management. Okay. So there's passive.
Yes.
Reactive. Proactive.
Yes.
And strategical.
Yeah, great.
So passive would be, let's say, you've built your stress up over the day and then you go home and you just sit on the couch and watch TV. You're not doing anything active and stress is just slowly leaving through not focusing.
Right.
Reactive would be perhaps you've built up stress acutely and then you go and meditate.
Right. So you're reacting to it.
You're actively doing something to bring stress down. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And then proactive would be, say, the weekly ice bath, where you're doing something that builds your overall baseline and resilience to handle stress better.
Yes.
And then strategical would be to actually look at your day or week and be like, these are the events causing stress, I'm going to remove them.
Or reduce them or something. Yeah, great. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
What do you think about that?
Do you know what? I love categories and stuff. I love compartmentalizing things and actually listing things out like that for clarity. So that's great. Yeah. And I agree with that. I think you've covered all of those areas. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I tried to capture something that caught all the high level things.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
I really do love that.
What stage do you find people are coming to you with their level of stress? Is it something that's been built up and there's been a prolonged period, maybe a high level of output needed at work, plus maybe an emotional stressor or something like that, and now it's got to a point of internal physiological stress where their body's producing symptoms without even having the external event of stress?
Yeah, it's usually that physical presentation that people see me. I think initially people will see counselling or something else for stress. They don't think I can adjust my diet and lifestyle to support my stress as much. Or if they do, perhaps they don't see it as needed as much of a guide. They could probably look on the internet or something like that. So I do tend to find that the stress levels that I'm seeing are quite ingrained. and they've been well practiced. they're well in there. And often to the point where if I'll ask someone if they can take me back to a certain time where they started noticing the symptoms, because the symptoms are just their body communicating to us. So this is, when did they start to see these symptoms, and even talk to me about other symptoms, because some people don't understand that stress also shows up in different ways in the body. Right. And so I'll dig deep as much as I can. And I'll ask what's going on around that time. And it's been, various things, Jeremy. It varies things for everyone. But then they'll layer more stresses on top because that's their life, And I'll give you an example. It might be that someone's had a lot of stress with their work, moving country, moving, house, or change of family or loss of someone. And, stress are happening there and symptoms started. And then they went along and other stresses occurred, perhaps even then they started to have a family. And then there was, some other stressor that occurred somewhere along, and it just gets compounded without them really addressing those core issues there. Yeah.
The problem is, once you get to that stage, no, you're right. You can be in a perpetual state of stress or even low grade stress, and that just becomes your baseline, and you forget what it's even like to come back to a rested state.
And that's why I think, absolutely. And that can even start in childhood, right? And people are realizing that, to go, I've only ever known stress. I don't know, I don't actually know how to switch off. Yeah. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to proactively look after my stress and do the things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's many layers to stress and our energy reserves. So over the last few years, I'd gone through a really difficult health journey back in 2018 where I lost my health to a significant level, a lot of chronic fatigue symptoms, energy management, mitochondrial type dysfunction. And then through trying mainstream medicine, all the alternative approaches, I'm actually not sure exactly what remedied it, but somewhere between a keto diet for cognitive dysfunction, water fasting, rest and pacing, and then 6 months later my appetite returned, and then I went overseas on a bit of a one-way travel, meditation, yoga, and things started to come back to the point that 12 months later I was able to do landscaping, a really physical job, and then demolition laboring, even more physical job. And then I probably pushed it a little bit far.
As people do,
I'm cured. I'm normal. I can do everything.
I'm going to run a marathon.
I remember at one point I did a PT session at the gym, and I was like, that didn't quite hit the spot. So then I did my own hour training after that, and I did personal best on bench, squats, and deadlift in the one session. And then later that day went to do martial arts and also doing demolition laboring. And in hindsight, I was like, that wasn't realistic.
Yeah, because when you're in, you're all in. Well, that's actually a really interesting journey. And I think a lot of people have not a similar story, but in a way of going, I hit rock bottom and I turned my life around. And it was through strategies that you used that worked for you. That helped you spin that around. And then you had to then test those boundaries, didn't you? And you went from behind the eight ball, to then right over here, and then you've had to bring it back here. And it's, where are you at now in your health journey?
It's actually somewhat cyclical. I'm not quite back where I was in 2018, but I definitely went through a big decline. So after that point, I did heal again and came back to balance. And then I got caught in doing. So I went and worked away doing laboring and machine driving for 8 months, doing 10 days on of 12-hour days, 3 days off, and did that for 8 months. Then 4 days later, went and did yoga teacher training, 30-hour bus, flight, everything. Landed there next morning, yoga teacher training. Got back to Australia the next morning, started personal training. While doing that, went to launch my business and run a retreat. Caught COVID. That really didn't help things. set off some inflammatory processes. Had a relationship that was, and also during the time away, I was healing my masculine is how I frame it now, but in a really strong masculine environment, I did find it difficult for a part, and you know, like the hazing and all that, and yeah, that had a level of psychological stress, but I got used to it. Then I had a relationship that was quite emotionally taxing. Then I went and did some certification that I got to the hotel when I went to do this, and I was just like laid there and I was like, I need a month of this. And then I kind of pushed for another few, like a month or two, and then really hit a low point. So I went overseas and I spent a month in like hotel rooms, like didn't even have the energy to go get food. I was just ordering whatever healthy food I could in Bali, just laying in a hotel room watching TV because I was just so exhausted.
Yes.
And then pretty much from there was a little bit better. Worked at a resort over in Thailand, really nourishing experience, but really also feeling not quite my full self here. There's a bit of recovery to be done.
Yes.
And then, had a really intense emotional experience at the start of last year, which caused, basically it created some anxiety. And I didn't realize, and this was a real slap on the wrist for me as someone that's learnt a lot about health.
Yes.
I was prescribed diazepam and didn't realize that within as little as 2 to 4 weeks of, let's say, 4 to 5 times a week, you can become physically dependent on it. And then when you stop taking it, it can create a imbalance of glutamate GABA receptors that can cause excitatory symptoms. And I had that after 4 weeks, only taking like half a tablet a day, 4 to 5 times a week. And I had massive withdrawal symptoms. Like, not that I mentally wanted it. I was like, no, don't want it. But physiologically, my stress levels went through the roof, went to like hypertension category, blood pressure. And I was like, just like, I can exercise and meditate through that. But the problem is, it caused a protracted withdrawal. So last year was almost a write-off for me. My health bottomed out really badly. And one of the biggest issues with that is gut health. And we have not just GABA receptors in the brain, but also through the intestines. And I think a lot of issues created for me because without those, the intestinal absorption, mineral and vitamin deficiencies occur. And then there's this cascading set of symptoms that occurred. So I'm kind of working through that now. And what can really suck is this protracted withdrawal can take up to 10 years in some people.
Yes. And that's good I mean, when I hear those 10 years, I think that you'd be fine to actually bring that forward in terms of, I think that you'll be on your mission to be rectifying that a lot sooner. But the damage is there. The damage is definitely there, and it can be that shorter time experiencing with a particular drug. Who would have known, right?
Yeah, that's right. And what kind of egged me on to do it as well? Yes, there was some anxiety that I was being lazy and not using my meditation, so there was a little bit of karma there for me, taking the path of short-term gratification or ease. Yeah. But then also, when I had taken them, a lot of my chronic pain, a lot of my long-standing symptoms were alleviated. I was recovering better from the gym. And I was going to the gym like 3 to 4, 5 times a week during this period. I thought, okay, cool. I can use that as a little bit of a stepping stone that I can recover better, and I can get the results that I want. I can stop taking that and keep going. And wow, 1 step forward, 5 back.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And that's it. It's so, I mean, did you know much about gut health before this occurrence, or?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. I mean, I think, because I could touch on so many things in that story. Thank you so much for sharing it, because I'm really fascinated, and I can't, and I automatically want to put my practitioner hat on and just ask you more, and delve in and stuff.
Feel free
I'm
to.
not here to do that. No, but maybe another time, right? But but what's so profound there is that not only is that there are lasting effects from whatever choices we do make for that short-term relief, I guess, but also the importance of our gut health. I think it's definitely a topic. I remember touching upon it when I was studying 16, 17 years ago. I remember being young then and people going, why on earth do you care about gut health? Isn't that something for old people? So it's good that it's actually at least known now and that you know about it too, and that the most people that I talk to understand the importance. I don't think people really understand how much it influences our entire health and our brain. I think that even just pointing out something as I do generally with gut health is that there's the nerve in our body that connects the brain and the gut, the vagus nerve. Yeah, and it's usually when I put that almost tangible illustration to people that they go, oh, that's the connection. Because if you just say the gut's connected to the brain, they're like, that's miles apart. My brain's thinking and doing everything and my gut just digests food and whatever. But when you start going, no, it's all connected, and that vagus nerve is constantly transmitting neurons back and forth, right? There's nothing in your gut that's not in your brain and vice versa. And it helps people to understand that what they're feeding, anything that goes in is going to be affecting their brain as well as their gut and everything. And that affects everything. Because even, our gut health, it's not just digestion as well, of course. It's our immune health. It's our hormone health. It's our mental health. It's the way our organs function. It's the way our cells function. It's so much. There's so much. Yeah.
100%. Because if you even look at when you have an acute level of stress and then your digestion goes, that's a real micro example of the brain gut health, right?
Absolutely. That's the absolutely. And it's even why that there could be potentially, and again, I live in a bit of a practitioner bubble, so I think that there's a prevalence of something happening in our community and society, but it may just be the bubble I'm living in. But there's a real prevalence of IBS. Where people are experiencing this and they're understanding gradually that, yes, they may need to change some of their lifestyle. They don't always need to go on radical diets and that sort of thing, though. It's often a brain-gut connection and actually fixing the gut as well as their mind and what's happening there and working with it. I mean, even physiologically, sorry if this is a tangent, but even physiologically, if you think about our bodies and even when we're being formed, and this is a scientist that illustrated this to me. So again, I'm probably going to mash it up. So I wish that I could remember it word for word.
Go
but
for it.
You've got the brain, you've got the gut, and we're basically a tube. We've got openings at either end, and it's just we're the same. It's all connected. And then we start to just stretch out so that there's a bit, there's gaps there. But really, at the end of the day, it's all one in itself. The prevalence of IBS, the prevalence of autoimmune illnesses and diseases. And again, people are responding well to low inflammatory diets, low gluten diets, but that's not always the root problem. Yeah, it's other things going on there too. Yeah.
And that can be a real issue that you're like, oh, I've got these symptoms, and then through trial and error, you do something that makes the symptoms better, and then you're like, okay, cool, I'll just keep doing this. Like a really good example of that is the FODMAP diet.
Yes. Yep, because it relieves symptoms, and people think, okay, great, now I can't eat anything.
And they do that for years.
Just have my crackers, and I'll and it's really not sustainable. No. So all for that approach, and it does alleviate symptoms, but it's not fixing the problem. No.
Yeah, exactly. Because even let's say I've done that with, I had chronic trigger knots and wasn't really getting anywhere with mainstream medicine, and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to go alternative medicine and treat symptoms for many years. And then that was fine. Okay, now massage isn't working. Now try acupuncture, try needling. And then you kind of go from one to the other. Meanwhile, the health's kind of slowly deteriorating because you're just trying to play whack-a-mole with different symptoms.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And it's about remembering that the symptoms are just communications. You know, we're not ultimately, because of our lifestyles and we're fast living and we don't have time, we just want to address symptoms, but they're just communications. You know, it's like that whole, you know, if the computer is shutting down on us and it's not working by, you know, smashing on the keys, it's not really it's the whole whack-a-mole thing, right? It's not really, it might actually all of a sudden reboot and restart and work, but it's you know, it's not going to fix the problem. You need to get in there and actually have a look. I really hope that the new wave of education for people is that the symptoms aren't the problem. The symptoms are just your body's way of communicating it to you. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the symptoms will appear in the weaknesses of your genes. So it's the reason why even something like you brought up COVID symptoms showed up differently in a majority of people. Yes, it was more respiratory, but some people got backache. Some people got, you know, gut health issues. Some people, you know, it affected because of the weaknesses in the genetics. And yeah, I could go on forever there too, but
inflammation's such a interesting one for me because I've, you know, it's been a lot of my lived experience, but it's also tied into stress management, and inflammation's definitely a key driver in so many different diseases and conditions, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive. And you know, inflammation is the body's way of protecting itself because the body is not out to get you. Your body is there to completely protect you and to help you survive. So again, any unwanted scenario and symptom that you're displaying is your body's way of going, okay, I'm going to do this to help you survive. I'm going to do this to help you survive. You might be really puffy and your joints might get sore and you might be achy, you know, but at least you're going to live. You're going to live through this because you could be sending it down a rabbit hole that is otherwise very detrimental. So inflammation again is a symptom. It's not the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's a beneficial thing in some cases like exercise, in infection recovery or wounding.
Absolutely. My son just recently fractured his elbow and instant inflammation. And of course, that was a signal that we needed to address it and not just put some ice and say, get over it. But we're not talking about parenting styles here, but it was a case of going, but that is a normal procedure. That's the body's way of sending in all the army there to protect that bone and go, right, okay, we've got to, you know, do what we need there to fix that bone and to protect it in the meantime. Yeah. So inflammation, it produces horrible symptoms, but they're all protective measures. So what are you doing? Yeah. You got to ask yourself, what am I doing that's getting my body to send out the army continuously and try to protect me? What's happening? What am I exposing myself to?
And that's the key, isn't it? Understanding why the body's presenting in that way rather than just being like, oh, it shouldn't be. Let's do what we can to stop that.
Yeah. To soldier on. It's that typical thing of pop that something and soldier on because no one has time for it. Yeah.
It takes a lot of mental effort as well because I think I fell into that mindset when I was younger that I was like, well, I can just do whatever and, you know, technology and medicine and science will heal me in the future. I'll just take a pill or something. Yep. And when you've got your health, you take it for granted. And then when you're actually starting to realize like, oh, wow, this is taking a lot to actually resolve, you do want the quick thing because you're like, let's say, I don't know, until you've actually immersed yourself and you've got a certain level of threshold of understanding across many different bodily systems, it is a lot of effort to then go and learn about it.
Oh, you betcha. And there's a lot of resistance to go and action it too. I mean, gosh, don't get me on a tangent with this, but the short-term drugs that we can take to alleviate pain and inflammation and everything is a fraction of the price of something that you could do that's actually going to be natural and support your body that might take a little bit longer but will actually rectify the problem and working with the practitioner and everything. It's a fraction. They pop it that, you know, it's the PBS. It's all subsidized. And look, again, I don't know if we should touch on that, but it's a massive thing. So even if someone is there going, okay, I really don't have time, And I've got an option here when I go to the pharmacist. You know, isn't it easier just to get some painkiller as opposed to, you know, treating that inflammation with some natural medicine and herbs and vitamins and minerals and gut supporting?
Yeah.
You know, isn't that going to take more effort there? More effort and more of my money?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a big topic at the moment. I mean, I don't think there's any Australian that's going to say that they want to be splashing out their money anywhere that they don't have to, right? So it's a thing of, you know, really, you're mentally fatigued, you're physically fatigued. You know that you have to make changes. What are the easy options that are also not going to break the bank? And unfortunately, that's where we get back to what we started talking about, where people choose the cookie cutter or the less
path of least resistance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which, do you know, I remember even studying anatomy and physiology, and do you know it's actually programmed within our bodies to choose the path of least resistance? So it's on a cellular level, not on a conscious level.
Trying to conserve energy.
Yeah, we're constantly trying to survive.
Yeah.
Our body is constantly trying to survive, and it will do whatever it takes to survive, which, if you don't mind me throwing in here as the nutritionist and practitioner, is why when people stop eating or limit their eating, especially as they get older, they start putting on weight and it drives them crazy. It's typically female, and that's typically because of the hormone profile, but it's crazy. But the body is going, holy hell, we're not getting food. we need to survive here. You know, I'm going to hold on to every bit of food that you put in, and you're going to see it.
And is that appropriately called starvation mode? Is that?
Which part? So when people aren't eating? That the body goes into starvation mode. Look, I think it's starvation mode. It depends on the circumstances, because people can go into true starvation mode, and I think the body does go into conservation mode as well. And so it starts to thing. But some people, you know, they could be trapped somewhere or something like that, and the body doesn't just start to produce a heap of weight. It's usually a mixture of lifestyle habits as well. I mean, if you want me to give you an example, it will be that if people are limiting their food intake, or they're running on caffeine, or doing whatever they can to prolong not eating, and then they just tuck into whatever is in front of them that may not always be the most nutritious. And so the body just goes, all right, so you're not going to give me anything, and then you're just going to give me this rubbish that I can't even really digest well, and is not providing me any of the essential nutrients that I need every day to work. So it's a bit of a bonfire. It's different to when if someone is genuinely lacked of food and they're malnourished. When you're malnourished, you'll definitely still, doesn't matter whether you're in the first world countries or third world countries, if you're malnourished and don't get enough vitamin C, scurvy is going to present itself in the same way. But for that conservation mode, yeah, it's different depending.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot online, starvation mode thrown out there, and basically it's coming around. If you drop your food intake to a certain degree, like let's say 500, 800 calories a day intake, then the body will hold on to food, and then you'll slow your metabolism and then start gaining weight.
Yeah, for most people, that's very true. Yeah, and it does depend. I have young clients as well, and I think anyone listening here too that's, ever done that and just gone for a period of not eating much or whatever the case, they've lost weight. So it's really a few different things meeting together in typically more mature. So I'm talking sort of even like 25, 30 up. That your body will start presenting different symptoms, and again, that could be a variety of different reasons. Is it what they're choosing to eat when they finally do eat, or have those 800 calories? Is it that they're triggering some genetic weaknesses as well? Is it that they're so malnourished? Because even something I haven't mentioned but that I share with everyone as well, especially when I'm doing group education sessions, is that just on a daily basis, or not even a daily basis, but on a general intake basis, there's about 93, 95 essential nutrients that we need on a regular basis just to get our bodies functioning. And so that seems like a lot of food that we'd have to consume, but luckily, really wholesome foods contain a lot of those nutrients all packed in one. And so that's often how I even start some of my corporate introductions, just to get everyone on the same page to go, what is nutrition and why the hell do we need to know it? And if someone's going, oh, it's because I want to lose weight, or someone's saying it's because I got inflammation, or it's someone, let's just all get on the same page and go, this is where nutrition science came from. We need these nutrients. Our body is so sophisticated that if we go for a long period without the nutrients, it will survive, but you will start to see symptoms. Yeah. And so that's another trigger of the weight gain because of it. So they will store weight, but they will also be, perhaps there will be symptoms of having low fat in their diet. I mean, most people need at least, say, 30% of their diet to be healthy fats. And, if they're restricting that, or they're restricting good old carbohydrates and they need them, and definitely proteins as well, their body will start to show the symptoms. And weight is protection. Weight is inflammation a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've certainly seen a lot of people that have gained weight and then they think, well, eating got me into this, not eating will get me out of this.
Calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
This is why it's really important to categorize that. It's very different for everyone, and it's really different for young people as opposed to more mature. And, I still think of a 25-year-old as, they can be mature and minded, but they're still young, right? But it's still, the body's starting to get into a point where it's more sophisticated and it understands things and it's needing things, especially for hormone profile and everything, male and female. Yeah, so this mentality of going, well, it always worked for me as a young one. I just ate less, I just ran a bit more and I was fine. It doesn't work as we get older. That's not always the reason, and it will often cause more problems than not. Yeah. So I think that we could even touch on the benefits here of fasting, because there is a time when restricting food is beneficial. Do you want to touch on that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So
maybe intermittent fasting and water fasting if you're...
Yep, absolutely. Well, so I think water is so essential. I think what's the term? So we could live for 7 days without food if we had to. That's horrible.
It's even longer.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
But you can only go maybe 2 or 3 days without water and see you later. You're not. We need water. So a water fast is just what I would call fasting. But during wake hours, because we don't want to drink water when we're sleeping. So that's a bit of a segue there to also say our bodies were designed to fast every single day. And that is even if it's just when we're sleeping. We are not meant to be eating. Okay, So if you think about that, so fasting is definitely not a new word. It might be trending, but it's definitely not a new word. And it's something that we have been doing since the dawn of time.
Breakfast.
Correct. Right? So it's the first thing that we eat when we break the fast. Now, a lot of people, I think in first world countries, including Australia, are eating very, very close to bedtime, and then, of course, picking up something as soon as they wake because they have been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day and so forth, and whatever its habit and everything else. While that's still a decent fast, whatever that is, our sleep time is also getting shorter, right? So some people are going to bed really late and waking up really early and just powering. So they, maybe sleeping for 6 hours. So it's a 6-hour fast. And there, do you see how it's all compounding to be a problem? Yep. And so across the board, and even looking into genetic health and working with thousands of people over the years, it's pretty safe to say that for a majority of people, a good 12-hour fast across the evening, so that's from dinner until breakfast, with hopefully about 8 hours sleep in between, is going to serve you well. Men, but this is a big thing I want to mention, if you don't mind, Jeremy. Men can fast differently to women. 100%, and that's all to do with our physiology and our cycles. All right, so men can basically extend their fasts and fast even if it's minimum 12 hours, even if they wanted to average that up to about 15 or 16 hours on a regular basis. They even do a lot of studies that show that exercising in a fasted state is beneficial for men. It's different for women. So this is even when we're touching on women's health. There's different phases of a woman's cycle that she could fast a bit longer, and there's actually different phases that she shouldn't be fasting at all. So the fasting that would occur for her is just when she's sleeping.
Yeah, very interesting. Anyway. And I would imagine that the ancestral origin of that is men going out hunting. There probably would have been more time where they were without food or, exercising because they were literally fasting while trying to catch food. So, yeah, it's interesting to see how much of those ancestral origins impact us today.
Absolutely. And I think as well, the female cycle is important to touch on, not necessarily in this conversation, but just in life and in health in general, because it's necessary to do what the female body can do, which is produce another life. And not everyone chooses that. I'm not saying that that's what females are born for or anything, but it's an option that they have. And with that, they need a change in cycle of their hormones, whereas men, to also help produce a life, you don't need rapid change cycles throughout any sort of time frame. In fact, your cycles are based, I think, every 15 or 20 minutes. You go through like a testosterone cycle, whereas women, it's different.
When would or should a woman fast and not fast in their cycle? Because forgive my ignorance, luteal.
That's all right.
I'm going to butcher it.
Yeah, don't. And you know what? I'm not even I've done a lot of research too, but I'll just say even week 1. So you can even look at week 1, if you don't mind me saying, is when a woman's bleeding. Okay. And that is going to be at a time where there's a lot of rest that should be involved, not a lot of heavy fasting, but that 12-hour fast is very safe during that period. I think most women intuitively want to chill out a bit more. Okay, so trust your intuition there. The second week is when we're actually building estrogen in our body, and estrogen gives us a little bit of superpower there. It doesn't mind running on lower insulin levels, so that means also we kick in that fasting state, which means we can fast a little bit longer. All right, so we can stretch it out like men, and that's usually week 1 and then stretching to around mid of the cycle. So that might be, say, about 10 days. And then we hit when a woman's ovulating mid-cycle. That's when she needs to nurture her body a lot more too and actually not fast as much. So you go back to about 12 hours. And then the week before she bleeds, you do not fast at all. Okay. That is when a woman, technically speaking, that's when a woman's actually building her progesterone. So progesterone's naturally dropping to release an egg. And we want to be keeping that progesterone as high as we can in our body by not exerting ourselves. So you can probably read between the lines here too and go, it's not just about fasting, it's also about exercise, right?
Yeah.
Because imagine there are women out there that are pushing themselves the week before they bleed just as much as they're pushing themselves the week after they bleed. And they're wondering why they're so much more fatigued, why they can't do 12 workouts a week. And they're going, I just don't get it. 1 week I'm fine. I must be just getting sick or burnt out. It's just purely because they're not producing the same level of hormone. So our hormones govern us much more than I think people would realize. They really, really do. And it's not, people think just they're sex hormones. They just, get us through puberty and do what they need to do, but it's much more than that. Our hormones even affect our personality, who we are, different symptoms, all sorts of things, and it's like an orchestra playing in the body continuously. And men, as I mentioned, your cycle is very, very short and it's very steady, which is a big reason why health studies for eons have always been conducted on men, because you're so much more predictable and so much more steady. Yeah.
That's a really interesting topic of hormones and I guess neurochemicals as well, how much that creates our sense of self. Like if, let's just say, to simplify, estrogen, testosterone, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, GABA, glutamate as the main ones.
Yes.
Those in fluctuating amounts based on the activities we're living in our life, the food that we're taking in, and even to a degree, the trauma we hold or the way we feel about ourselves fluctuates that as well.
Yes.
But then the physiological output of that also fluctuates how we feel about ourselves.
You betcha.
And that's just such an interesting concept, isn't it? That
yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
Like I felt that during last year, let's say going into 2023 or midway through that, felt very much in my masculine, like feeling like really strong sense of self. Last year with, no doubt a decrease in many of those areas, I felt like I'd been thrown back to 5 years prior where I was like less in my masculine, less in like a stronger sense of self. And I was like recognizing, well, I've still got the knowledge and like the wisdom of self. I'm not actually changing how I feel about myself, but the physiology is influencing that sense of self.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's probably, it's going to happen to most people throughout their life too, because there's always going to be different things that is affecting their physiology and as well their perception of who they are and their output. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. How interesting.
Well, I recognize the time, so I want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on here. That was a really pleasant chat.
Oh, it's so wonderful. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you. And where can people reach you?
They can reach me. I have a website, and my website's tracietalkshealth.com.au, Tracie with an IE. I'm on Instagram as well under Tracie Talks Health, and I also have a Facebook page, so I'm on the usual routes there, but it's Tracie Talks Health with an IE, if they want to Google me too.
Living up to your name.
This is where it came from. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks.
No worries. Well, have a good rest of the day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks so much for your time, Jeremy. Great to meet. Thanks.
Likewise. See ya.